The dinner was still steaming when Grace Halloway vanished in the mountain town of Orofino, Idaho. Population 3,112. The winter of 1970 arrived with a blizzard that blanketed the hills along the Clearwater River. At 5:42 p.m., the clerk at the gas station at the edge of town remembered seeing the 17-year-old high school girl buy a bottle of soda, flash a smile, and pedal off toward Dent Bridge. Her red coat stood out against the gray snow, the last streak of color on the riverside road as night fell. In the small house at the end of town, her mother set out a cooling meal on the table while her father pulled on his coat, calling her name into the cold wind. What happened in the hours that followed would haunt Orofino for half a century. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. In the winter of 1970, Orofino, Idaho, was shrouded in thick fog rising from the icy Clearwater River. On the pine-covered hills, snow fell fine and silent, the air heavy with the scent of sap and wood smoke from small chimneys. Orofino High School let out early due to a forecasted blizzard that night. Students hurried across the yard, boots crunching on ice. Grace Halloway, 17, was the last to leave. She wore a red wool coat, a gray scarf, and her long brown hair spilled over her collar. A faded canvas backpack hung over her shoulder, and her bicycle tires grated on the snow with a dry sound as she pedaled down the narrow riverside road. Below Dent Bridge, the water was dark as steel, the river flowing slow and cold. That road was Grace's daily route, a familiar path through pine forests and past a small gas station where everyone knew her face. The clerk there said she stopped by, placed a soda on the counter, gave a faint smile, and left, her small figure fading into the thin snow. A truck driver recalled passing the bridge and seeing a girl in a red coat standing by her bike, bending to adjust her shoelace. After that, no one saw her again. As darkness settled, the snow thickened and the streets emptied. In the small house at the end of Riverside Street, a yellow glow spilled through thin curtains. Grace's mother set out dinner, placing a third plate on the table, then stood still. Outside, the wind tilted the chimney, and the radio in the living room played a brief forecast about an approaching cold snap. Her father checked his watch, pulled on a sweater, and grabbed his keys. His tires crunched on hard ice, headlights sweeping through the trees, revealing only snow and silent woods. He drove over the bridge, past the gas station, and back, his hands trembling on the wheel from the cold. The door swung open, wind rushing in, and he said nothing. She stood, looked at him for a moment, then walked to the phone on the cabinet. Her hands shook as she dialed, the rotary clicking in the quiet room. When the other end picked up, she whispered, her voice catching, "My daughter hasn't come home. Please help us." On the other end, the duty officer hesitated, then transferred the call to Sheriff Dale Harper. He was in his office, in the cold night, when a gust from a cracked window sent papers fluttering on his desk. Harper grabbed his coat, took a flashlight, and stepped out. Minutes later, patrol car lights illuminated the snow-covered road. Orofino was quiet year-round, and this was the first missing person call in years at night. Harper reached the Halloway house, where the mother still stood by the phone, eyes red, and the father sat motionless by the window, his boots caked with snow. "How long?" Harper asked, his voice low and hoarse from the cold. "Since sunset," the father replied. Harper nodded, then said softly, "We'll find her." Within an hour, 6 people were mobilized, 2 patrol officers, a rescue worker, and a few neighbors. Harper split them into groups, directing them to search the route Grace usually took, the road along the Clearwater River to Dent Bridge. Truck headlights and handheld flashlights cut through the fog, sweeping the silent forest. The wind blew against them, carrying tiny glinting snowflakes. They walked dozens of paces apart, calling her name into the void, their voices swallowed by the wind. A police dog barked, then fell silent, its leash clinking against a windbreaker. By the riverbank, white vapor rose in patches, misty as smoke. Harper aimed his flashlight at the water. The beam reflected only a cold, solid black. "She couldn't have come down here," he muttered, then signaled the group to keep moving. The night deepened, and the blizzard began. Visibility dropped to a few meters, the wind stinging their faces. Someone suggested stopping, but Harper shook his head. "We keep going to the bridge," he said. The narrow road wound around the hillside, so quiet they could hear pine branches snapping under the snow's weight. They moved in a line, flashlights sweeping, each step sinking into thin ice. Near dawn, a young man spotted something, shallow tracks in the snow, parallel, small, and even. Harper knelt, brushing away fresh snow to reveal spoke-shaped marks, bicycle tracks. They ran along the road, then vanished at the bridge's edge. He aimed his light below, the gray water churned slowly. Everyone stopped. No one spoke. Only the bridge cables hummed in the wind, a low, droning sound. Harper stepped onto the railing, squinting into the distance, snow dusting his hat in a thin white layer. He signaled the group to fan out along the riverbank. They returned later, shaking their heads. No footprints, no belongings, nothing else, just smooth snow, as if no one had passed through. Harper stood still for a long moment, then said quietly, "Just loud enough for the nearest person to hear, there's nothing here tonight." The wind blew harder, scattering his voice. He looked up at the dark sky, snow falling silently and thickly. Finally, he signaled everyone to head back. They moved slowly, flashlights flickering through the trees, the light fading into the forest. He glanced back at the bridge one last time. The water below black as cold glass, reflecting nothing. In the howling wind, Harper thought the Clearwater River had swallowed something, and it might be a long time before it gave it back. The next morning, the snow stopped. The town lay silent in winter, only the distant rumble of a snowplow echoing. A faint sun rose behind the mountains, its weak light glinting on ice-laden pines. Harper drove his patrol car back to Dent Bridge. He hadn't slept, his mind replaying the smooth white road and buried bike tracks. When he arrived, a few from the previous night's search were there, warming by a roadside fire, holding hot coffee, faces sallow from cold and sleeplessness. No one spoke much. Harper stepped out, flashlight still clipped to his belt, boots sinking into thawing snow. The morning breeze crossed the bridge, light but biting, carrying the faint hum of steel cables. He scanned the area, the settled snow revealed patches of mud and gravel. Harper retraced the path where they'd found the bike tracks. He knelt, scraping new snow with a small iron rod, and froze. Under the railing's edge, the gray frame of a bicycle glinted. "Here!" he shouted. Two men ran over, pulling it out together. It was Grace's bike, faded green paint, caked in wet mud, front wheel warped as if it had hit something hard. The pedal was stuck, the seat speckled with snow and moss. Harper inspected it closely. No blood, no long skid marks or signs of a struggle, just a thin layer of mud on the spokes. He touched the frame, cold and rigid, the metal like ice. "It fell here, or was left," he said softly, his voice heavy. To the right, a few meters from the bike, Harper noticed a larger track. He bent close, scraping thin snow with a small knife, revealing deep tire ruts, car tires. They ran parallel to the road's edge, then stopped abruptly before the railing. No signs of a turn, no skid marks leaving. Harper looked up, following the direction. The road was narrow, winding, the riverbank steep. If a car stopped here, it was for one of two reasons: to pick someone up or to block someone's path. An officer jotted notes, marking the spot with a wooden stake. Harper pulled out his notebook, sketching the scene. The bike's position, the tire tracks, the distance between them. He worked slowly, methodically, habits from his military days. But he knew the conditions were harsh. No professional forensic techs, no specialized cameras. He used his personal 35mm to snap a few shots, simple angles in dim light and fog. Those photos, he thought, might be all that remained if the evidence was erased. By noon, the sky cleared, melting snow forming small puddles. Harper sat on the bridge railing, staring at the Clearwater River. The water remained dark, flowing slowly, ice chunks hitting the bridge supports and dissolving. He pictured Grace stopping here, maybe signaled by someone or forced to stop. The bike fell, she stepped off, and something happened. Harper didn't voice it, but he knew her disappearance wasn't just getting lost anymore. Someone asked if they should drag the river. Harper shook his head. The water was too deep, the current too strong, the equipment insufficient. He told them to search the banks, the grassy slopes, every tree and bush. All afternoon, they found nothing beyond the old bike tracks and some waterlogged wood. As the sun sank behind the hills, Harper gathered everyone. He ordered 2 officers to pack the evidence. The bike wrapped in thick tarp, the mud and tire tracks, photographed and roughly mapped. He knew, with the town's limited resources, those samples might prove nothing. But he did it anyway, fearing a day when no traces would remain. Before leaving, Harper stood at the bridge's head. The sky darkened, the wind icy, mist swirling over the water. Across the river, snow-laden pines stood silent as witnesses. He looked down where the bike had been, now just bare muddy ground. Harper closed his notebook, eyes tracing the road stretching into the forest. Only faint tire tracks remained under the dusk, and a sense he was standing at the edge of truth and emptiness. That afternoon, Harper returned to the Red Owl gas station, the last place Grace was seen alive. Snow covered the tin roof, the old sign tilted, icicles dripping from the eaves like glass knives. Inside, the air smelled of motor oil and stale coffee. Earl Dawson, the clerk, about 50, wiped the counter. He remembered the night before clearly. The girl came in near dusk, he said, eyes distant, bought a soda, left a few coins. I told her a storm was coming, she should head home. She just smiled, said, "I'm going now," and pedaled off. Harper asked if anyone else was there. Dawson thought, then nodded slightly. Yeah, a wagon pulled up, right as she left. Light brown, big old. I didn't see the driver's face. He parked at the curb, headlights on. Harper noted every detail carefully. Leaving the station, he stopped by the town's long-haul transport office. There, he met Charlie Bowers, a truck driver, who came forward after hearing the missing person report on the local radio. Bowers said that night, just before 6. Driving from the bridge toward town, he saw something odd. The girl was by the road, near the bridge's edge. A wagon was parked a few meters away. I think they were talking. She leaned on her bike. The guy stayed in the car. No arguing or anything, just something felt off. The headlights were shining right on her, and he didn't get out. Harper asked, "Did you see his face?" Bowers shook his head. Not clearly, but curly hair, wearing a cap. The car had a dented side, probably hit something. The fragments of testimony slowly pieced together in Harper's mind, though they didn't yet form a clear picture. He opened his notebook, jotting 2 possibilities. 1. Accident. Grace fell, her bike sliding into the river. 2. Lured, or taken by someone in a light brown wagon, then vanished. Both led to the dark water below the bridge. He called the neighboring county police, requesting a dive team. For the next 2 days, the river search expanded. Motorboats scanned each stretch, anchor lines raking the muddy bottom. The Clearwater was so cold that engines kept freezing, divers needing 3 layers of gear. They lowered a cable camera, seeing only solid black and glinting pebbles. Nothing. No car, no body, no bike fragments. On the banks, rescuers probed the mud with sticks, digging piles, but found nothing. Harper watched them work, sweat mixing with snow on their collars. His eyes sunken from sleeplessness. He knew if Grace had been swept away, the chances of finding her were near zero. But something nagged him. The car tire tracks, stopping abruptly at the bridge. If it was just an accident, why was that car there? On the 3rd afternoon, Harper sat in his small office. A topographic map spread before him, red pins marking searched areas. Outside, Melting snow dripped past the window, a monotonous sound. A young officer brought the local paper. The front page headline blared, "Teen Girl Vanishes on Dent Bridge Road." Grace's old school photo was printed from her records. A girl with long brown hair, bright eyes, a slight smile, a picture that made Harper's throat tighten. He knew from that moment, Grace's disappearance was no longer just a town matter. It had become an obsession, an unanswered question the community would carry. At a brief meeting that evening, Harper told his team, "I don't think this was an accident. If her bike fell, she could have called for help. No signs of a struggle, no blood, no debris. Someone made her disappear." The room fell silent. An older officer nodded. "Could be someone she knew." Harper looked at the map. The small bridge nestled between curving hills, the river like a dark rope across it. He pointed there, voice low. If it was someone she knew, they knew how empty this road is at night. They knew she was alone. Late that night, Harper drove back to Dent Bridge. Headlights cut through the fog, glinting off the metal railing still streaked with mud where the bike had lain. He stepped out, standing alone on the bridge. Wind rose from the valley, carrying the river's chill. Below, the water rippled, reflecting his car's faint yellow lights in distorted specks. He looked down, wondering if that wagon was still out there, hidden under the water, or gone with the girl. Harper opened his notebook, writing the day's final report. No solid evidence of an accident. Primary hypothesis, abduction. He closed it, slipping it into his pocket. The night fell, silent and heavy as a blanket over the town. Somewhere out there, Dent Bridge Road lay still in the snow, as if waiting for someone to return, someone no one knew would ever be found. 10 days later, Orofino sank back into its usual quiet. Snow piled on rooftops, pines, and Dent Bridge, where headlights had once lit up a white sky. The search team disbanded. Those who had scoured the river with Harper, turning every stone, now silently removed marker ropes, rolling them up quietly. The area around the bridge was cleared, leaving only cold iron railings and old tire tracks buried by the wind. No one said it, but everyone knew they wouldn't find anything more. The Clearwater kept flowing, slow and icy, as if it had swallowed everything. Harper sat in his car, writing the final lines in his investigation log. His handwriting wavered from hands stiffened by hours in the cold. No further evidence or witnesses found. Victim missing. Assumption, abducted, or undetermined accident. He stopped writing, staring out the window. The sky was pale, light reflecting off the snow in a thin gray sheen. In the distance, the road Grace had biked on stretched endlessly white. In the days that followed, Harper reviewed missing person reports in the region, questioning gas stations, diners, and bars along the highway. No one knew anything more. One driver thought he might have seen the girl in Lewiston, but the timeline didn't match. Every lead fizzled out. Calls to the sheriff's office dwindled, until the phone only rang for trivial town matters: a deer in a backyard, a truck stalled in the snow. Grace's name faded from the papers, replaced by storm updates and rising heating oil prices. In the small sheriff's office, Harper stood before a board pinned with evidence: black and white scene photos, handwritten statements, a map of Dent Bridge, all neatly arranged but meaningless. He unpinned Grace's high school photo, its edges curled and faded, and clipped it back into the file. On the cover, he wrote in steady letters, Case 7014, Grace Halloway, missing, presumed abducted. A red close stamp pressed down, leaving a smudged ink mark. That day, Harper met Grace's parents for the last time. They came to the office in silence. The mother, visibly thinner, clutched Grace's old wool scarf. The father, eyes hollow, asked, "So that's it?" Harper paused, then said, "For now, we have nothing left to go on. But I'll keep this file open." The father nodded, his gaze cutting through the wall. Before leaving, he shook Harper's hand, cold and dry, and said softly, "If anything comes up, let me know, even something small." Harper nodded, but inside, he knew he'd have nothing to call them about. A week later, the Halloway family left Idaho. Their loaded truck rolled through the town center, pausing briefly in front of the Red Owl gas station, then disappeared around the bend, leading to the highway. The people of Orofino watched in silence, no one saying goodbye. Only the gas station clerk, Mr. Dawson, quietly removed Grace's poster from the bulletin board, folded it, and placed it in a drawer. That winter lingered longer than usual. Harper still patrolled daily, but Dent Bridge Road became a stretch he avoided looking at as he drove past. Yet many times, he stopped mid-bridge, turned off the engine, stepped out, and gazed at the river below. The cold water flowed slowly, faintly reflecting a leaden sky. He wondered where the river might have taken her if something terrible had happened, and why it left no trace. In March 1970, Harper submitted the case's final report. On the last page, he wrote, "Case temporarily closed. Insufficient physical evidence. No additional witnesses. Victim's whereabouts unknown." He shut the file, placed it in the office's metal cabinet, third drawer from the bottom. As the metal clanged shut, the sound echoed dully, like an unwanted end. Harper stared at the cabinet for a moment, then turned off the light and left the room. Outside, snow began falling again. The wind swept across the bridge, carrying the faint hum of vibrating cables in the night. Harper drove the old road, headlights piercing the thin fog over the river. He promised himself that when spring came, he'd search again, just to be sure he hadn't missed anything. But as the first snowflake melted on his windshield, Harper knew that spring, and those that followed, would bring nothing new. In the years that followed, Grace Halloway's name sank among hundreds of other reports, fading from most of Orofino's memories. Dent Bridge remained, spanning the Clearwater River like a curved steel line, iced over in winter, moss-streaked in summer. The water below kept flowing, occasionally churning muddy after rain, then calming again. No one spoke of the missing girl, except Dale Harper. He worked at the sheriff's office for another 15 years, his hair graying, eyes weakening, but each time he patrolled that road, he paused to look at the river, as if waiting for something to surface. In the early 1970s, Grace Halloway's case file was transferred for the first time from the Clearwater County Sheriff's Office to the state's temporary archive. The reason was brief: no further investigation activity. The cardboard file box was sealed, stored with hundreds of other missing person cases, many just a few sheets and moldy film photos. Occasionally, new staff would open it, read a few lines, then close it again, learning nothing more. In the spring of 1979, a major flood submerged the old archive warehouse under half a meter of water. When the water receded, dozens of files were damaged. Black and white film rolls were exposed, light blurring their details. The photo of Grace's bike under the bridge became splotched. Harper's green ink notes faded, leaving only fragments legible: railing, no blood, tire tracks. The file was dried, rebound with twine, and relabeled. Grace's disappearance became one of many cases no one reopened. In the 1980s, Harper was promoted to deputy sheriff. He kept a personal copy of Grace's case in his desk drawer, a few photos, notes, and the original report. Each year, on the day she vanished, he quietly brought them home, reread them, and returned them to the same drawer. No one at the station asked about the case anymore. People said Harper was obsessed, unable to let go of a dead file. But to him, keeping it wasn't stubbornness. It was a promise to the hollow-eyed father who'd asked, "If anything comes up, let me know." When he retired in 1985, Harper cleared his desk, taking home only a small metal box. Inside were faded photos, a creased map, some notes, and a copy of the case file. He placed it under his desk in his wooden house on the town's edge. In the years that followed, he occasionally opened it, reread each page, and wrote letters to the new sheriff, asking if anyone was revisiting Grace's case. Most letters went unanswered. A few times, he received brief thanks, promises to review when resources allow, then silence again. By the 1990s, America had changed. High-profile missing persons cases, and new murders dominated the press. Modern investigation methods and computer databases emerged, but old files like Grace Halloway's remained in yellowed paper boxes. Harper, now in his 60s, rarely went out. He read the paper daily, hearing of cold cases reopened with DNA and new techniques. Each time, he thought of Grace. He knew, if there were samples, modern science might do what he couldn't. But Grace's evidence was nearly gone. No blood, no hair, just blurry photos and penciled sketches. In 1999, the Idaho State Police created the Idaho Cold Case Registry, listing unsolved cases. They sent requests to every county, reviewing missing persons files from the 1950s to 1980s. Grace Halloway's name appeared eighth, with a brief note: female, 17, missing from Orofino, February 1970. Presumed abducted. The evidence column was blank. A copy of the list was sent to local sheriff's offices. Harper, retired nearly 15 years, received a copy from an old colleague. He opened the envelope, seeing Grace's name among strangers: Linda Rowe, Karen Hollis, Jamie Dunn. Each name was an unfinished story. He sat for a long time, then folded the paper and placed it in his familiar metal box. That night, Harper sat on his porch, smoking a cigarette. Early winter air turned his breath to white mist. In the distance, the Clearwater River flowed steadily, low and deep. He thought of Dent Bridge, the snow-covered bike, the father's eyes, and realized time had faded everything but the lingering regret. On the table, the old metal box sat closed, holding faint memories only he recalled. Out there, Grace Halloway's file now bore a new name in the system: Cold Case #0008. A cold label for a girl who once biked across a bridge and never returned. In April 2005, the Clearwater County Sheriff's storage room was cleared after years of dust. Rusty metal shelves held yellowed paper boxes, the air thick with the musty smell of old documents. In the far corner, on a high shelf, was an old cardboard box labeled Case 7014, Halloway, Grace. No one in the office remembered the case details until it appeared on a list for review under Idaho's data recovery program. The task fell to Ellen Briggs, a young investigator recently transferred from Boise. Briggs, 30, held a criminal science degree and an obsessive note-taking habit. Her job was to digitize pre-1980 cold cases, mostly unsolved disappearances with tattered papers and faded images. She opened Grace's box late one afternoon, sunlight streaming through the window, stirring dust. Inside were a few black and white photos, handwritten notes, and a Dent Bridge map. The papers were so brittle they rustled like dry leaves. Briggs carefully scanned each photo, enlarging them on her computer. One showed the bike tilted under the bridge, next to faint tire tracks in the snow. She zoomed in on the tracks, adjusted contrast, and paused. The crosshatch pattern was clear, not truck tires, as the old report suggested. "This pattern," she whispered. Briggs printed the image, cut out the tire section, and cross-referenced it with a 1960s tire database. She compared dozens of patterns, from Chevrolet to Plymouth, before stopping at a near-perfect match: Ford Country Squire 1968-69. She reviewed Harper's report: wide, deep tire tracks, large tread spacing, suspected family or passenger car. His observation, without modern tools, aligned closely with her finding. Briggs smiled faintly, feeling a thread connecting two eras of investigation. She noted, possible Ford Country Squire, late 68-69. Need DMV record check. The next day, Briggs visited the Idaho DMV archives to check vehicle registrations from that era. The old system used microfilm, reels of tiny text. Wearing gloves, she turned the reel, the projector casting lines of data. The 1968 Ford list showed 4 vehicles in Clearwater County, but by 1969, 11 more were added. She read each record, pausing at Model Country Squire. Owner Robert Keene, Kamaya, Idaho. The name stopped her. She cross-checked the address, Kamaya, just 40 miles from Orofino, along Highway 12, straight to Dent Bridge. Digging into insurance records, she found the registration expired in early 1970. Around Grace's disappearance, no further records existed. Briggs opened a map, tracing a line from Kamaya to Orofino to Dent Bridge. She wrote in red, 35 miles. Direct route, possible link. At the page's corner, she added instinctively, he could have known that road. That evening, alone in her office, the computer's glow lit old black and white photos. In one, Harper stood by the bike, holding his notebook, looking younger but weary. Briggs felt an invisible link between her and this man. Two people, 30 years apart, staring at tire tracks in snow, asking, what happened to that girl? She drafted a preliminary report, requesting to reopen the case due to unverified leads related to a suspect vehicle. Knowing cold cases were hard to revive, Briggs prepared thoroughly: maps, digitally enhanced photos, and a list of all Ford Country squires registered locally in the late 1960s. Only one remained unverified or unregistered: Robert Keynes. She searched demographic records for the man. Results showed Robert A. Keene, born 1949, Kamaya resident, occupation mechanic, owned a repair shop. No criminal record, but a speeding ticket in 1972. Briggs sat still, then wrote, possible suspect. Need interview pending review. Before leaving, she printed another enlarged tire track image, pinning it to her board beside Grace's 17-year-old photo. Under the yellow light, they sat side by side, the girl's face and the snowy tire marks, awaiting an answer buried for 35 years. Briggs turned off the light, locked the door, but glanced back once. In that moment, she knew this case wouldn't let her go, just as it hadn't let Harper. As night fell over the town, light snow dusting the windows, the Case 7014 box was placed back on the desk, not a relic of failure, but the start of a new investigation. The next morning, Ellen Briggs arrived at the office early. Outside, fog blanketed the hills, the sun a faint streak behind gray clouds. She spread two large maps on her desk, one reprinted from 1970, marking Dent Bridge and the Clearwater River before the downstream dam. The other, a current map from Idaho's hydropower agency, showing Lake Dent formed in the late 1980s. She aligned them, comparing terrain curves, then drew a red line connecting matching areas. A wide water expanse appeared just downstream of Dent Bridge, labeled Seasonal Flood Zone in 1970, submerged only during rains. Now, after the lake's expansion, it lay over 30 meters deep, inaccessible. Briggs circled it, noting unsurveyed, possible submersion zone. She revisited Harper's 1970 search logs. The team covered only 200 meters around the bridge, using wooden boats and iron hooks. No sonar, no depth maps. Harper had written, strong current, poor underwater visibility, search halted at 0.2 miles downstream of bridge. That spot was now Lake Dent's deepest point. Briggs leaned back, a thought sharpening. If something fell into the river in 1970, a car, perhaps, it would rest under thick mud, never found. At noon, she visited the Kamaya retirement home where Dale Harper lived. At 72, his hair was white, but his frame was steady. He recognized her instantly when she mentioned Grace Halloway. I've been waiting for someone to reopen this, he said, voice rough with age, eyes still sharp. Briggs spread the maps on a wooden table, explaining her findings. Harper leaned over, studying the overlaid maps, his eyes stilling. This spot, he pointed to the deep lake area. Back then, it wasn't underwater. We didn't dive there, it was a flooded sandbar. If you're right, everything left could be under that mud. Briggs said she wanted to request Idaho's Conservation Agency's multi-frequency sonar to scan the lake bed. Harper nodded, a faint smile crossing his weathered face. Tech's better now. If something's down there, it won't hide anymore. When Briggs asked him to join as a consultant, he paused, then said softly, I think I still owe that girl a promise. The next week, Briggs prepared a formal plan, a sonar sweep with support from a hydrology tech team and rescuers. She drafted a 30-page report detailing Lake Dent's terrain, currents, and suspected area. Hydrologists confirmed the zone was never scanned due to uneven depths and thick mud distorting signals. They agreed to test new multi-frequency side-scan sonar capable of 3D imaging of underwater objects. At the review meeting, Briggs presented to the board. She projected two images, the 1970 black and white photo of Dent Bridge with the tilted bike, and a current terrain map with the dark lake zone. "This is where the 1970 search stopped," she said, pointing to the depression. "This area was never scanned. If anything fell that night, Grace Halloway vanished. It's here, and never seen since." The room was silent. An older officer asked, "What do you think you'll find after 35 years? Briggs replied firmly, "I don't know, but we've never looked in the right place." The board approved the plan. A small team formed, Briggs as lead investigator, Harper as field consultant, 2 sonar technicians, and a deep water diver. They chose late June, when the lake's water was lowest and weather stable. On prep day, Briggs stood by Lake Dent, once the old Clearwater. The water was flat as a mirror, reflecting a gray sky. Wind carried mud and moss scents. Harper approached, wearing a thick coat, holding a yellowed file copy. "My old backup," he said slowly. "Haven't opened it in 30 years. Briggs looked at him, then at the water. She stood where Harper had in 1970, except now, everything he'd searched for lay under dozens of meters of water. The survey boat docked at dawn the next day, equipped with multi-frequency sonar and high-powered GPS. Briggs and the tech team calibrated the equipment, adjusting frequencies for the thick lakebed mud. Harper sat at the bow, watching the first sunlight glint on the water, his eyes holding a mix of hope and fear. "Do you think we might find the car?" Briggs asked. Harper replied slowly, "If it's really down there, it's been waiting for that girl longer than a lifetime. And if not, at least we didn't let her be forgotten." As the boat's engine started, its steady hum sent small ripples across the lake. The sonar began scanning, sending waves beneath the surface. The first images appeared on the screen: rippled mud, scattered rocks, then emptiness. Briggs sat glued to the grayscale display, each scan a slice of memory delving deeper into waters untouched for 35 years. Harper stood silently behind, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the misty lake. The sonar sweep began, a belated but determined effort to reclaim answers swallowed by the river for over 3 decades. In the quiet expanse of Lake Dent, amid the damp metal scent and cold pine forest breeze, 2 generations gazed into the dark water, where Grace Halloway's story might still lie, waiting to speak through echoes and reflected waves. The third morning of the Lake Dent sweep started with thick fog. The lake's surface was a flat gray mirror, reflecting the silent figures on the survey boat's deck. Ellen Briggs, in a life jacket, sat before the large sonar screen, eyes locked on the undulating wave patterns. Beside her, sonar technician Jonas Myers adjusted the frequency, his voice steady. "Depth at the center is 31 meters, signals clear. If there's something car-sized, we'll see it." Harper sat behind, hands cupped around a steaming coffee mug, gaze unwavering on the fog-covered lake. He'd stared at that water for half his life, but never had it seemed so still, as if all those years of waiting converged in this moment. They began scanning from Dent Bridge's edge, moving in concentric spirals downstream. The screen showed faint shadows, rocks, sunken logs, small metal debris. Occasionally Briggs jotted notes, marking coordinates with codes. 2 hours passed, the signal steady, nothing unusual. Then, at 900 kHz, a distinct echo appeared, a large metal object, elongated, with sharp edges, not natural. Myers squinted, adjusting brightness. "Look at this, it's not a rock, it's got a frame structure," he said, zooming in. The screen revealed a rectangular object, about 4 meters long, 1.5 meters high, buried in thick mud. The front angled upward, the rear sunk deeper. A round shape at the edge reflected sonar strongly, possibly a wheel. The boat fell silent. Harper leaned toward the screen, his aged eyes wide. God, it's a car. Briggs swallowed hard, her voice soft, as if afraid to break the air. The size matches a country squire. Myers nodded, dragging the cursor to measure. Length 4.8 meters, fits a 68, 69 wagon. Briggs ordered the coordinates marked. A red dot blinked on the digital map, downstream of Dent Bridge, 30.7 meters deep, 240 meters from the west bank. Harper looked out the deck window, eyes tracing the foggy water. We stopped right above it in 1970, he said slowly. Just 200 meters short. If we'd had sonar, he didn't finish. Briggs signaled the tech team to prepare the ROV, a remote-operated vehicle with a high-pressure camera. The yellow blocky device was lowered by steel cable. As it hit the water, the lake rippled faintly, waves spreading like breaths. The video screen lit up, showing murky water and suspended silt. The ROV's LED lights swept the lake bed, their blue-white glow reflecting off mud, gradually revealing a large shape. The team crowded the screen. The image sharpened, a long metal frame, coated in moss and sediment. Its curves matched a station wagon. The ROV moved closer. The lens panned slowly along the vehicle. The paint was eroded, but on the side, the light caught a faded circular metal patch with the rusted word Ford. Briggs held her breath. Myers whispered, almost to himself. Ford logo, definitely a country squire. Harper gripped the chair's armrest. The screen showed more, the front left wheel stuck in mud, still with its steel rim. The windshield shattered. The front frame crumpled, suggesting a hard impact before sinking. The ROV circled, revealing the rear door slightly ajar, mud and moss seeping inside. Glinting flecks, possibly glass or metal fragments, drifted out in the gentle current. Briggs took a slow breath. We need to seal this area off now. No one dives until forensics approves. She turned to Harper. What do you think? Harper stared at the screen, his voice catching. I think we've finally found where she stopped. They marked the GPS coordinates, establishing a temporary 100-meter no-entry zone around the site. A red buoy was dropped, floating silently on the water like a marker of something about to surface. Briggs sent an urgent report to the Idaho Sheriff's Office, requesting salvage support. While awaiting a response, she and the hydrology team continued scanning the surrounding area, confirming no other objects. Under the late sunset, the sonar screen cast a cold glow on Briggs' face, reflected in her eyes like old memories. That evening, back at a temporary shore tent, Briggs reviewed the ROV footage. The light swept through the water, gliding over drifting mud. At frame 32, she paused in the rear door's gap. Something looked like dark fabric. The edge of a coat or seat cover unclear. She zoomed in, but the image was blurry, grainy. Could just be upholstery, Myers said. Briggs stayed silent. Harper stepped over, stared long, then said softly, or maybe not. That night, Briggs wrote a detailed report, noting each find: metal object, 4.8 m long, station wagon shape, at 30.7 m depth. Miss ROV observation shows faint Ford logo, consistent with 1968, 69 country squire. Location matches 1970 disappearance site. Salvage operation needed, with forensic and underwater recovery specialists. She printed the report, signed it, then looked at Harper, still sitting by the tent's door, gazing at the foggy lake. We'll salvage tomorrow, she said. Harper nodded faintly, voice low. I don't know if I want to see what's inside, but we have to. The next morning, Lake Dent was cordoned off. Yellow police tape lined the shore. Warning buoys dotted the suspect area. Media was barred. The tech team set up pulleys, flotation bags, and a floating crane. Briggs received a call, confirming the Idaho Sheriff's Office had reopened Case 7014 as an active investigation. As she hung up, Harper stood on the boat's edge, staring at the still lake. In the morning fog, Dent Bridge loomed like a dark giant, its wet cables glinting silver. Harper whispered, almost to himself, 35 years, Grace. Now, we're bringing you home. The marker buoy floated quietly, reflecting the day's first sunlight. Beneath the cold water, the car lay still in thick mud, a time-sealed witness, awaiting awakening after half a century. Briggs gazed at the lake, her breath mingling with the thin mist. Harper stood there, his shadow long on the deck, eyes fixed on the buoy. "Tomorrow," he said softly, "everything comes up. The truth, too." Briggs nodded silently, hearing the wind sweep through the bridge, its low hum echoing a promise from the past. At dawn on September 19, 2020, Lake Dent stirred in thick fog. The water was a vast mirror, reflecting faint yellow crane lights and marker buoys. The air was heavy with wet metal and engine oil. The crane's low hum mixed with the clank of chains on pulleys, like time's slow countdown. Ellen Briggs stood on the command boat's deck, a yellow armband marking her as lead investigator. Beside her, Dale Harper, in a thick coat, hands clasped behind his back, his weathered face holding deep anticipation. They hadn't slept. The team was ready for Idaho's largest salvage of a forgotten case. The lake was eerily calm, as if nature itself held its breath for the truth's return. At 8:15 a.m., the ROV was lowered for a final check. The screen showed the clearest image yet, the old station wagon tilted, its front buried in mud. Steel cables were hooked to the chassis, chains taut. The tech lid signaled. The engine's hum grew louder. Water droplets bubbled on the surface, then a large air pocket rose. Everyone held their breath. Within minutes, a dark gray roof emerged from the murky water, glinting faintly in the weak sunlight. The rusted moss and sand-covered frame was unmistakable, a late 1960s Ford Country Squire. As the car neared the surface, the smell of wet metal and aged mud spread, sharp and cold. Briggs signaled to stop the engine, letting the water drain slowly. Mud slid off, clinging to shattered windows. A diver swam up, tapped the frame and shouted, "Doors still locked." Harper turned away, lips tight. They used a pry bar gently, avoiding further damage. When the rusted hinge creaked open, a stale puff of air escaped, carrying rust, gasoline, and something else, sweet and decayed. Briggs' throat tightened. The car was hoisted onto a floating platform. The driver's door swung open. Then what the team had awaited for months, for 35 years, emerged from the cold water. A small curled body floated slowly, held by a seatbelt still fastened across the chest. Long brown hair fanned out in the water, tangled but intact, draped over shoulders. A dark red coat, faded by time, was caked in silt. Briggs took a sharp breath. No one spoke. Only the drip of water from the wet coat, the slack of cables, and the lake's stillness remained. The forensic team approached, covering the body with a white tarp. A technician noted, "Female body, driver's seat, seatbelt intact, naturally mummified by cold water." Harper stepped closer, his hands trembling. In the light, he saw a detail he'd never forgotten, the gray wool collar's edge and a small silver snowflake button. He whispered, almost to himself, the red coat, still there. Briggs turned to him, eyes blurring, voice catching. "It's Grace, sir." "Sir?" They continued inspecting the car. Mud and moss coated the floor, but the back seat held its shape. In the glove compartment, technicians found an old leather wallet, swollen from water. Inside were a faded dollar bill, some coins, and a blurred student ID. When wiped, the text emerged, "Grace Halloway, Orofino High School." Another compartment held a small notebook, pages stuck, but the cover bore handwritten green ink, chemistry notes, 11th grade. Briggs held it with both hands, feeling something sacred. On the passenger seat, a torn ticket envelope was found, still legible. Lewiston Cinema, Friday the 13th of February, 1970. A team member whispered, "Movie ticket, maybe that night." Harper closed his eyes, shoulders trembling. Memories flooded back, the snowy night, tire tracks, the bike, the mother on the phone. He'd thought this day would never come, and now it was both painful and serene. As the car was placed ashore, Briggs examined the mud falling from the chassis. The Ford logo remained, rusted but clear. She noted, "Evidence matches suspect vehicle, 1968, Ford Country Squire, registered to Robert Keene, Kamaya." That line ended 35 years of ambiguity. The forensic team took over. They collected everything: hair strands on the door, fabric from the seat, mud from the cabin. Briggs oversaw each step, eyes fixed on the red coat, sealed in a special nylon bag. Harper sat on a concrete step by the shore, hands clasped, watching every move. When Briggs approached, he said softly, voice hoarse, "I always thought she was down there, but I didn't expect to see it." She replied quietly, "You kept your promise, Harper. She's been brought home." The afternoon sun slanted, gilding the water. Those present, hydrologists, divers, police, stood silent as the ambulance carrying Grace Halloway's body left. They removed their hats, bowed heads, and said nothing. Only the engine's faint hum faded, blending with the wind through the pines. Harper stood long by the shore until the ambulance vanished. He spoke into the air, "Sorry, Grace, we should have found you sooner." Ellen Briggs wrote the final field log, September 19, 2020. Victim Grace Halloway, missing since February 1970, found in a Ford Country Squire at Lake Dent, Clearwater County, Idaho. Identification matches evidence, clothing, personal items. She paused, gazing at the darkening lake in the sunset. The water still flowed, as it had for 50 years, cold, silent, and now, finally, it had returned the secret it held. The body was taken to Idaho's forensic lab in Boise that night. The ambulance rolled quietly through dark pine forests, green lights reflecting off trees, onto the misty road. Ellen Briggs sat in the escort vehicle's back, eyes on the white-shrouded body bag. Beside her, Harper was silent, hands clasped tightly. They said nothing for the 4-hour drive, hearing only the engine and whistling wind. At the lab, the clock read 2:47 a.m. The air was icy, thick with antiseptic. A forensic team awaited. The next morning, the autopsy began. Chief Coroner Dr. Miriam Cole, a small woman with a steady voice, led the process. Harper and Briggs stood behind the observation glass, where a cold white light shone on a steel table. Grace Halloway's body lay neatly, preserved by the deep cold. Her brown hair clung to the scalp, her red coat separated for sampling. Cole gently cleared thick mud from the neck and shoulders, revealing a clear dent in the forehead. The room stilled. "Frontal bone fracture," Cole said softly, her voice even as a report. "Crack extends to the temporal side. Direct, heavy impact." Briggs noted, "Cranial fracture, impact trauma." Harper looked through the glass, eyes darkening. He recalled the car's deeply dented front from the salvage. Cole examined the chest, lungs, and abdomen. Signs of pleural effusion, darkened lung tissue. "Drowning," she said. Another doctor, in rubber gloves, added, "Primary cause of death, drowning." Cole shook her head. "Not that simple. The head trauma came before drowning. She was unconscious when the car sank." Briggs glanced at Harper. Both understood. The girl never had a chance to call for help or unbuckle. By noon, the team analyzed tissue and hair samples. They confirmed Grace died around her 1970 disappearance. DNA from teeth and hair matched the Halloway family's 1999 cold case file sample at 99.98%. Briggs stared at the numbers, feeling the weight of the past converge. Harper placed a hand on her shoulder, saying softly, "Now there's no doubt. She has her name back." That afternoon, the forensic lab's mechanical team examined the Ford Country Squire on a lift. The frame dripped, rust flaking off. Lead engineer Randall Pierce inspected each dent and steel angle. "The front's crumpled from the right," he said. "Hard impact from the side, or pushed from behind, causing loss of control." He pointed to a dent by the driver's door, metal buckled. "No brake marks, means the car didn't stop reflexively. She didn't brake." Briggs examined the driver's floor. The seat belt was intact, the buckle undamaged. "She was trapped," she said. Pierce nodded. "Yes, and look here." He pointed to the rear, where metal was slightly deformed, paint scraped. This suggests force from behind, not random. Someone may have pushed, he wrote, likely external force applied from rear, manual push, or vehicle-assisted impact. Briggs read it aloud, glancing at Harper. He nodded silently. Oil analysis showed no engine activity post-impact. The car didn't run when it sank. The gas cap was closed, the gearbox in neutral. Pierce sighed. She didn't drive it down. It was set to free roll. The words echoed in the cold metal room, a belated indictment between Briggs and Harper. At day's end, Dr. Cole issued a preliminary conclusion. Cause of death, drowning, following severe cranial trauma. External force evidence, heavy head impact, possibly from a blunt object or collision. Circumstance, victim unconscious before submersion. No signs of struggle or defense. High probability. Incident involved human intent. Car deliberately pushed into water. As she read the final line, Harper closed his eyes, exhaling deeply. The room was so quiet, the air conditioner's hum was audible. Briggs wrote the report, her hand trembling slightly. Before them, the old story was no longer a disappearance. It was a murder. That evening, Briggs left the lab with a copy of the findings. Boise's sky was heavy gray, drizzling. Harper stood under the awning, lighting a cigarette. He looked older than ever, but his eyes shone, the quiet glow of someone who'd waited a lifetime to say, "I was right. She never left." Briggs looked at him, voice low. "But now we prove who did it." Harper nodded, flicking the cigarette into a puddle. "You know," he said, "his name's in that file. We just need the right page." As they walked to the car, Briggs clutched the report. Cold words, fracture, drowning, external force. Dry, emotionless, yet holding the image of a 17-year-old in a red coat, brown hair, trapped in the dark of a sunken car. She gripped the file, rain smudging a corner. At the bottom, Dr. Miriam Cole's signature stood bold under, "Case reclassified as homicide." With that line, Grace Halloway's case entered a new chapter, one of justice revived, after 50 years buried. The next morning, at the Idaho State Police's technical office, the mechanical team finished cleaning the Ford Country Squire. Mud and moss were carefully removed, revealing a faint serial number etched on a metal strip near the engine. A technician brushed it with a small steel brush under UV light. The numbers emerged, rusted but legible. 8P76S 31904. He looked at Briggs, VIN number, no doubt now. Briggs leaned in, photographing it. The number matched her 2005 DMV microfilm find, 1968, Ford Country Squire. Registered to Robert Keene, Kamaya, Idaho. She immediately opened the archived file. The old registration typed on a typewriter bore a scrawled signature at the bottom, Robert A. Keene. The record confirmed the vehicle was never reported stolen or deregistered. The final line read, "Registration expires 02/1970. The expiration date, exactly when Grace Halloway vanished. Briggs stared at the number, feeling everything starting to close into a perfect circle. At noon, she and Harper drove to Kamaya, a town smaller than Orofino, nestled among low pine hills and old lumber yards. The town hadn't changed much since the 1970s. The gas station still stood at the main road's corner. The diner had few patrons, and faded signs hung loosely on utility poles. Harper sat in the passenger seat, silent for the drive. As they passed the "Welcome to Kamaya" sign, he said quietly, "I came here in the early investigation years." Keene had just opened his garage then. Briggs asked, "Was he ever questioned?" Harper shook his head. "Not enough cause. Back then, we had no tools, just gut feelings. I remember him acting normal, polite, maybe too normal." They stopped at the old garage on the town's outskirts, Keene Auto and Repair Asterisk, now under new ownership but with the same iron sign. Inside, the air mixed oil, metal, and fresh car paint. The current owner, a middle-aged man named Lyle Corin, said he bought the place in 1984. When Briggs asked about old records, He thought for a moment and said, "If you're looking for something from Keene's time, it might be in the storage. I kept all the old books when I bought it." They followed him to a small back room, dust swirling thickly. Corin pulled out a large cardboard box filled with yellowed ledgers and receipts. Briggs, gloved, flipped through each page. Most were routine: oil changes, tire patches, truck repairs. Then she stopped at a smaller sheet near the end, with a familiar scrawled signature, * Robert Keene. The 12th of February 1970. Bodywork repair, right rear panel, repaint brown metallic *. Briggs took a deep breath, reading it aloud to Harper. He stepped closer, his eyes sharpening. February 12, 1970. One day before Grace disappeared, the paper detailed rear bumper replacement, tail repaint, same-day delivery. In the right corner, * paid cash *. Harper said softly. If his car was repainted, the brown the witness described wasn't the original color. Briggs nodded, photographing the receipt and placing it in an evidence bag. "We've got 2 matching pieces, car and date." That afternoon, they returned to the county office. Briggs sent scans of the VIN and receipt to the state's legal department. Confirmation came within hours. The VIN matched Robert Keene's registration exactly, with no overlap in the system. The car was never reported sold or destroyed. She printed the confirmation, clipping it with the body photos and autopsy results. Everything pointed the same way. Harper stood by the window, gazing at Kamaya's gray afternoon sky. He said quietly, "He never left here. Lived his whole life in Kamaya, running his garage, fixing cars, watching us know nothing." Briggs opened her laptop, pulling up current demographic records. The screen displayed, Robert A. Keene, born 1949, resides Riverside Road, Kamaya. Occupation, retired mechanic. Lives alone. She looked at Harper. No more words were needed. Before leaving the office, Briggs called the Idaho state prosecutor, summarizing the case. The salvaged car, confirmed as Robert Keene's, the repair receipt from the day before the disappearance, and the autopsy concluding the car was intentionally submerged. The line was silent for a few seconds. "Then gather more personal evidence. If he's alive, we need to talk." Briggs nodded, eyes resolute. "He's still in Kamaya," she replied, "and I'll be the one knocking." That evening, they stopped at a small roadside diner. Harper sat across from Briggs, holding a cold coffee. He spoke slowly. "That day, I remember a call to the station. Someone saw a brown wagon parked at the gas station just before the snow fell. I checked, but no one knew whose it was. If we'd had today's tech, that girl might not have stayed underwater half a century." Briggs stayed silent. She looked at the old receipt in her coat pocket, its faded letters heavier than any testimony. "Tomorrow," she said, "we're meeting Robert Keene." Harper nodded, his eyes glinting in the diner's dim light. Outside, night fog cloaked the hills, the road to Kamaya silent, as if holding its breath. In Briggs' chest, a cold, clear feeling rose, the sense of someone about to face the true shadow of a case, thought dead. As they left the diner, the wind carried a faint gasoline scent from afar, the familiar smell of a garage, a car, and a memory about to be unearthed, after 50 years. The next morning, Briggs and Harper left the motel at dawn. Kamaya's sky was foggy, the riverside road damp, heavy with pine and wood smoke. Robert Keene's house sat at the end of Riverside Slope, beside an abandoned lumber yard. The gray wooden house had a rusted tin roof, windows half covered with newspaper. An old, unlicensed truck parked by the fence. Briggs turned off the engine, taking a deep breath. Harper looked at her, voice low. He was always reserved, quiet, but if you hit the right spot, he'll talk. Briggs nodded, slipping a recorder into her pocket, then walked to the door. Keene answered after a few knocks. He looked far older than his file photo, thin white hair, wrinkled skin, cloudy gray eyes, face creased deeply. His hands bore oil stains, a mechanic's habit that never left. "Miss Briggs?" he asked, voice rough and dry. She nodded, flashing her badge. "Investigator Briggs, Idaho State Police. We'd like to ask about a Ford Country Squire you once owned." Keene frowned, squinting. "That car? Hell, that was ages ago." Briggs replied calmly, 1970. "You remember?" They sat in a cramped living room, the air thick with gasoline and mildew. Tools hung on the walls, alongside old car photos and a faded newspaper. Briggs started the recorder, voice steady. "Mr. Keene, records show you registered a 1968 Ford Country Squire. It was never deregistered or reported stolen. Can you tell us what happened to it?" Keene crossed his arms, leaning back, eyes dodging. "Sold it long ago. Some guy from Lewiston bought it. Don't recall the name. Paperwork probably got lost." Briggs opened her file, sliding the garage receipt across the table. "This is your signature, right? Receipt for repainting the rear panel, February 12, 1970. Keene glanced at it, nodding slightly. "Yeah, I fixed it." "So what?" "My car, I repaired it." Briggs watched his eyes closely. "Did you know Grace Halloway? The girl who vanished in Orofino around then?" Keene froze, then gave a faint smirk. "Everyone knew. The whole town talked about it for months. I even helped search, drove out that night." Briggs leaned forward. "You helped search?" Keene nodded. "Harper was in charge. Ask him." "I met him a few times." Harper, silent until now, said slowly. "Yeah, I remember. You showed up one night with a flashlight and truck. But I don't recall anyone inviting you." Keene shrugged, "Just wanted to help. Who didn't feel for that kid?" The room grew heavy. Briggs flipped her notebook, voice calm but firm. "You said you crossed the bridge that night. Remember the weather?" Keene looked out the window, gray light on his gaunt face. "Snow, lots of snow." "I left town around 8, drove over the bridge, didn't see anyone. Did you stop?" Briggs asked. "No, just passed through." Briggs nodded, voice lowering. "We found your car under Lake Dent last week. Ford logo still there, and inside was Grace Halloway's body." Keene froze for seconds, then let out a dry, off-key laugh. "What? My car? You're joking, right? I sold it in 71. Briggs slid the VIN photo toward him. "This is the chassis number. Matches your registration perfectly. No sale record, no deregistration. Your car never left this state." Keene went silent, eyes darting, avoiding hers. Harper watched, noting his twitching jaw. "I don't know anything about that girl," Keene said softly, voice hoarse. "If she was in the car, someone must have stolen it." Briggs replied quietly. "Could be, but we'll need your DNA to rule you out." A court order was issued that afternoon. Briggs returned with a forensic tech, requesting Keene's cooperation for a sample. He hesitated, then reluctantly extended his hand. As the swab touched his cheek, Keene stared at Briggs, eyes tired but wary. "You think I killed that girl?" Briggs didn't answer. "I think," she said slowly, "there's something you haven't told us." 3 days later, the DNA results arrived in Boise. Briggs opened the envelope in her office, Harper beside her. The report was printed on white paper, titled Forensic Comparison. Biological samples from vehicle interior. Her heart raced as she skimmed it. The conclusion read, biological sample from steering wheel and seatbelt, male profile. DNA matches 100% with Robert A. Keene. Briggs set the paper down, the room silent. Harper broke it first. "See that?" He said. He helped search for her. "Now we know where he looked, right where he left her." Briggs took a deep breath, voice low and slow. "This isn't suspicion anymore, it's direct evidence." They immediately submitted the report to the prosecutor's office. An urgent summons was signed, ordering Robert Keene for formal questioning at Idaho State Police headquarters. As Briggs packed the file, Harper placed a hand on her shoulder, voice like gravel. "You know, I waited 50 years for a fingerprint. Now we've got DNA. But what I want most is his confession." Briggs nodded, eyes resolute. "He'll talk. Or I'll make him." That evening, Briggs sat alone in her office, replaying the interview recording. Keene's voice came through, slow, sometimes halting, long pauses, breaths, the clink of a cup on the table. At minute 12, he said, "I remember that night was cold. The bridge was slick, headlights bouncing off the snow. That girl was alone." Then silence. Briggs rewound, listening repeatedly, a chill down her spine. Amid the crackling fireplace in the night, she knew it wasn't just a lie. It was the echo of guilt cracking after 50 years, and she was the only one patient enough to hear it through. On the morning of October 4th, 2020, Kamaya's sky was thick with fog, cold dampness clinging to the patrol cars parked along Riverside slope. 3 police vehicles and a forensic van stood silently outside Robert Keene's gray wooden house. Yellow tape was already up, a small tactical team awaiting orders. Ellen Briggs stepped from the command car, windbreaker collar up, holding an arrest warrant signed by an Idaho court at dawn. It read, "Robert A. Keene, suspect in the murder of Grace Halloway, based on DNA and direct physical evidence." Harper, behind her, lit a cigarette but didn't smoke, eyes still as ash. Briggs took a breath and signaled. 3 officers approached the door. Rapid knocks echoed. "Idaho State Police. Mr. Keene, open the door." No response. On the 3rd knock, the lock clicked, the door creaking open. Kuhn stood there in an old sweater, face haggard, hair disheveled. He saw Briggs, then the police cars, exhaling as if he'd known this was coming. "You're here," he said slowly. Briggs read clearly, "Robert Keene, you're under arrest for suspicion in the death of Grace Halloway. You have the right to remain silent, and to an attorney." Keene nodded, unresisting. As officers cuffed him, he whispered, "I didn't kill her. It was an accident. I was just scared." Harper, on the porch, watched like someone closing a book read for half a lifetime. Briggs turned to the forensic team, searched the entire house and garage, focus on personal storage, old items. Inside, the house reeked of mildew and engine oil. Tools lined the walls, a wooden table piled with oil cans, bolts, and wrenches. The garage, linked by a rusted iron door to a small kitchen, held more. Under dim yellow light, a corner had old cardboard boxes. Briggs pulled them out. They contained old newspapers, Houston Tribune *, the Orofino Times, mostly 1970 issues, headlines blaring. "Teen girl vanishes on Dent Bridge Road." Many were crumpled, edges caked with mud. Briggs flipped through, finding a small clipping of Grace Halloway's smiling school photo in one folded paper. In the corner, faint pencil scrawl read, "Found her, God," a tech whispered. Briggs signaled for silence. She checked the next box. Amid paper scraps was a yellowed envelope, tied with a rubber band. Inside were small items, a half-torn movie ticket, faint but legible, Lewiston Cinema. Friday the 13th of February, 1970. Briggs held it, staring long. She placed it in an evidence bag, labeling it. "Matches the ticket found in the car," she told the forensic tech. In the bottom box, Harper found a small wooden case, its lock rusted. He pried it open with a screwdriver, revealing odds and ends, a folding knife, a broken heart-shaped keychain, and a rolled-up dark red fabric coat trim. Harper said nothing, handing it to Briggs. Gloved, she unrolled it, the light catching silver stitching. "Grace's coat," she whispered. Harper nodded faintly, voice breaking. He kept it for 50 years. The living room was searched too. On a table, amid old magazines, a tilted frame held a black and white photo of Dent Bridge from the 1970s. In the bottom corner, handwritten, "Winter 70. Briggs studied the scene. Snow, steel railing, empty road, then looked around the silent house. Everything seemed preserved, like a museum of guilt. Meanwhile, Keene was led to the patrol car. He sat in the back, cuffed, back straight, eyes blank. Briggs stood by the door. "Anything to say, before we take you?" she asked. Keene looked at her, lips trembling. "I didn't mean to." She fell, hit her head. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do." Briggs tilted her head. "And you pushed the car into the river?" Keene looked away, voice barely audible. "I was scared they'd think I killed her. I just wanted to hide it." Briggs stared long, then said, "You hit it." For 50 years. That afternoon, at Kamaya's police station, Briggs reviewed the evidence log. Old newspapers on Grace Halloway's disappearance, 14 issues, marked and annotated. Lewiston cinema ticket, the 13th of February 1970, matching car evidence. Red fabric, matching victim's coat material. Heart-shaped keychain, rare, matching 1970 case description. Private photo of Dent Bridge, no source. Briggs submitted the log and DNA report to the prosecutor. Based on physical evidence, indirect statements, and forensic results, Keene with 2 counts. Manslaughter for actions leading to Grace Halloway's death, and evidence tampering for intentionally pushing the car into the lake to conceal the act. Harper stood in the hallway, watching Briggs sign the final indictment. He said softly, "See, he didn't confess to murder because he believes it was a mistake. But accident or not, he left that girl underwater for half a century." Briggs nodded, voice slow. "Justice delayed is still justice." As the car carrying Keene left the station, a light rain began. Drops fell steadily on the windshield, streaking faintly. Harper watched, eyes weary yet calm. Briggs stood beside him, holding the evidence envelope, the 1970 movie ticket, now the final key linking past to present. In the distance, Kamaya's pine forest sank into fog, wind whistling through the old garage's tin roof. The town seemed to know something had ended, a story buried, now unearthed by 2 generations of investigators, one old, one new. In the gray afternoon light, as the suspect's car vanished down the slope, Harper said softly, "A final farewell. Justice always finds its way back, just sometimes it takes a longer road than we expect." The comprehensive forensic report on Grace Halloway's case was completed after 3 weeks of additional investigation. The 172-page file, cover boldly printed, Forensic Reconstruction Report. Case #7014, sat on the table as Ellen Briggs opened it before Harper. Outside, Kamaya's sky held a thin fog, but in that small room, the air thickened with the weight of cold numbers and conclusions. The report opened with vehicle scene analysis. Boise's forensic mechanics team simulated the Ford Country Squire's descent into Lake Dent using dynamic software. Results showed the car was positioned on a slope near the bridge's edge, nose toward the water, gearbox in neutral, handbrake fully disengaged. No brake marks or skid tracks on the road, meaning the car didn't crash, but was gently pushed until gravity took over. At the rear, experts found a small dent aligned with a truck's bumper height or a metal bar. The clean metal fracture indicated impact before rust at the time of the incident. Next was the vehicle door mechanics. The driver's door was found half open, hinges bent outward, possible only if the car was pushed into water with the door unlatched. An open door would have let water flood instantly, sinking the car 3 times faster. Experts concluded the occupant couldn't escape, likely unconscious before submersion. Briggs read this aloud, voice low. "She never had a chance." Harper nodded, eyes half closed, as if hearing the bridge cables whine from 1970. The second forensic section detailed the autopsy. Grace Halloway's body showed key points: a depressed frontal bone fracture, crack, extending to the right cheekbone. No water in the stomach, typical in conscious drowning victims. This confirmed she was unconscious, possibly dead before lungs filled. No hemorrhaging around fingernails or wrist skin ruled out a struggle. Blood on the car floor and seatbelt showed old coagulation, proving the head wound bled before submersion. Page 47 stated, "Primary trauma, blunt force impact consistent with mechanical surface. Secondary cause, drowning, due to asphyxia after loss of consciousness." Briggs read aloud, pausing. "So Keene might have hit her while she was in the car," Harper mused. "Or she hit her head when shoved against the door. Either way, he knew she was out, and he didn't call for help." The third section analyzed the vehicle's chemical traces. Floor mud contained high iron and carbon, consistent with gasoline residue. A thin gasoline layer near the rear hatch suggested the fuel cap was slightly open during impact, indicating the engine was off, but pushed by external force. On the dashboard, time-blurred fingerprints yielded DNA from steering wheel and seatbelt sweat, matching Robert Keene perfectly. The report noted, "Contact DNA consistent with driver, no secondary profile found." No one else drove that car after him. Page 89 detailed the scene reconstruction team's findings. They calculated the 22-degree slope's angle, estimating 200 pounds of force to push the car, enough for an adult to nudge with a shoulder. "Just one shove," Harper said softly, "and it went under." Briggs didn't reply, eyes fixed on the illustration, a gray wagon sliding slowly into the water, driver's door open, occupant slumped, hair spilling. The final section, over 30 pages, assessed post-incident behavior. Based on the February 12, 1970, repair receipt and Grace's disappearance the next day. Investigators concluded Keene physically collided with her, possibly in an argument or trying to drive her home when she refused. The impact caused Grace to hit her head on the doorframe, knocking her unconscious. Instead of calling for help, Keene pulled the car off the bridge, opened the door, placed her in the driver's seat, buckled her in, and pushed the car into the river. The rear dents, disengaged brake, and neutral gear were undeniable evidence of intent. The forensic conclusion read, "All mechanical, biological, and circumstantial evidence indicate intentional concealment of an accidental or violent event. The vehicle was purposefully submerged. The victim was deceased or unconscious prior to submersion. Classification: homicide by concealment. Associated with evidence tampering." Briggs closed the file. The room fell silent. Outside, wind blew through the window, carrying the sound of dry leaves scraping tin. Harper said slowly, "He thought time would wash it all away, but iron and water don't lie." Briggs looked at him, eyes weary but fierce. "Now it all fits. Mechanics, forensics, DNA. No room left for accident." That afternoon, she sent the report to the Idaho prosecutor's office. In the attached email, she wrote one line, "All evidence confirms intentional concealment of a crime, consistent with charged manslaughter and evidence tampering." As Briggs left the office, Harper lingered, eyes on a Dent Bridge map printed on the wall. 35 years, he muttered, and just a number on metal to pull him from the dark. Briggs turned back, a sad smile. "Not just the number, Harper. You, the one who never forgot." That evening, the report was approved, becoming Idaho's official record. On the final page, under Case Closed, Forensic Determination. Intentional concealment of homicide were two signatures, Ellen Briggs and Dale Harper. One began the case, the other ended it. Between them was the name of a 17-year-old girl, printed for the first time in half a century, Grace Halloway. No longer missing, but victim. During the formal interrogation at Clearwater County Jail, Robert Keene finally began to speak. Not a clear confession, but fragmented pieces, halting sentences pieced together by investigators. Briggs sat across from him, recorder on. Cold light shone on the gaunt, 71-year-old's face. His hands clasped tightly. Eyes cloudy but still defiant, as if clinging to something to lighten his guilt. "How did you know Grace Halloway?" Briggs asked, voice calm and even. Keene sighed, glancing at the table, voice hoarse. "She used to pass by my garage. I was new then, young, about 20. She lived nearby, sometimes stopped to pump her bike tires or borrow tools. Sweet kid, always smiling. I think she just saw me as an acquaintance." Briggs pressed, "Did you ever drive her to school?" Keene nodded, "A couple times when it rained, just helping out. Small town, everyone helps." Harper, behind her, added softly, "Even when she didn't ask." Keene didn't answer immediately. After a pause, he said quietly, "She didn't mind." The 1970 witness reports noted, Grace often passed Keene's garage on her way home from school. Some classmates said she was occasionally driven by a man wearing glasses, in a brown wagon. At the time, no one thought it odd, but now, those small pieces were fitting together. Briggs opened the file, placing a 1970 photo of Dent Bridge on the table. "The night of February 13th, you were there." Keene looked at the photo, then at Briggs. Yes, I met her at the Red Owl gas station. She just left school, said she was biking home. Snow was starting to fall. I offered to drive her for safety. She agreed. Briggs asked, and then? He fell silent for a long time. The jail's air conditioner hummed. Briggs' pen tapped lightly on the table. Finally, Keene said, "We drove about half a mile when she started arguing. I said something stupid. I asked if she wanted to go to Lewiston for a movie. She laughed, called me old and weird. I got mad, pulled over." He paused, hands clenched, knuckles white. "I just wanted to apologize, but she opened the door to get out. I grabbed her arm to pull her back. Then she slipped. She fell, her head hit the doorframe. I called to her, but she didn't answer." Briggs asked, "Was she dead then?" Keene shook his head, eyes blinking rapidly. "I don't know. She was unconscious, blood on her forehead. I tried shaking her, but she didn't wake. I thought she was dead." Harper sat silently, his sunken eyes fixed. He'd heard countless excuses in his career, but Keene's voice, mixed with regret and fear, still choked him. Briggs pressed, "Why didn't you call for help?" Keene took a deep breath, as if the question itself crushed his lungs. "I panicked. I was scared people would think I did something bad. She was young, and I, a man, alone with her in the car. Who'd believe me? I didn't want to go to prison." His words echoed in the room, lingering like the old impact on Dent Bridge. Briggs asked, "So what did you do next?" Keene answered, almost mechanically. "I sat in the car for a while. It was cold, snow falling thick. I thought if I left her, someone would find her. But then I saw truck headlights pass by. I was afraid someone would stop. I drove to the bridge. I didn't know what I was doing. I stopped, moved her to the driver's seat, buckled her in. I opened the door, gave a slight push. The car rolled." Briggs stared, voice low but clear. "You didn't push hard." Keene shook his head, tears welling, but not falling. Just a shoulder nudge. "I saw the car roll, slow, then vanish. No scream, nothing, just snow." The statement was later transcribed into the official record, matching the forensic evidence, the head impact, the seatbelt, the open door. Every detail aligned perfectly. Harper, after hearing it all, said only, "Do you know what you just admitted, Robert?" Keene looked at the floor. "I know, but I didn't mean to kill her." "I was just scared," Harper replied softly. "You were scared and left that girl underwater for 50 years. That's not fear anymore, it's a choice." As they left the interrogation room, Briggs felt a chill in her bones. Outside, the sky was overcast, drizzling, the road wet like that night in 1970. In the car, she opened her notebook. Initial motive, emotional loss of control, leading to accident. Subsequent action, intentional concealment, driven by fear and self-preservation. No premeditation, but full awareness of guilt. She closed the notebook, turning to Harper. He was staring out the window, voice low. "I wondered for years, why didn't he leave? Why stay in Kamaya? Now I get it. He couldn't leave that place, like a guard to his own guilt." Briggs nodded, saying softly, "Sometimes the punishment starts the moment someone chooses silence." That night, as she wrote the final report line, Briggs noted, asterisk motive, fear and self-preservation, after unintentional killing. Response: deliberate destruction of the scene and concealment of the body. Conclusion: conscious act of concealment, constituting manslaughter and evidence tampering. She set the pen down, exhaling. Outside, the first snow fell on Kamaya, blanketing roofs, roads and traces of a story too long untold, but finally given a voice amid silence and guilt. In the winter morning of 2021, Clearwater County Court opened the trial of State of Idaho vs. Robert A. Keene. The sky was overcast, snow dusting the gray stone steps of the old courthouse. Inside, the small courtroom was packed with press, locals, and a few of Grace Halloway's relatives, aged over half a century since her disappearance. Ellen Briggs sat in the front row, in a dark green coat, holding a file. Harper sat beside her, silver hair stark, eyes calm like someone witnessing what he'd waited a lifetime for. On the bench, Judge Arthur Wexler peered through glasses, his deep voice filling the room. The trial for case number 21-017, State of Idaho vs. Robert Keene, charged with manslaughter and evidence tampering, now begins. Keene was led in, wearing a wrinkled shirt, wrists in light cuffs. He scanned the room, his cloudy eyes pausing on Briggs, not with hostility, just exhaustion. Briggs held his gaze, as if reminding him the truth doesn't age. State Prosecutor Daniel Laird stepped to the podium, voice firm. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not just an old case. This is a crime buried by time, now risen with the car submerged in Lake Dent for 50 years. We will prove Robert Keene deliberately pushed that car into the water, with Grace Halloway inside. Whether out of fear or to escape, it remains murder. He opened a slide presentation. The screen behind showed a blurry sonar image, the long shape of the Ford Country Squire, tilted on the lake bed. Next came ROV footage, yellow light sweeping through mud, a wheel emerging, then a broken steel frame. This is the first evidence, Laird said, pointing. The car was pushed into the water, brake off, driver's door open. No accident signs, but intent. He moved to a forensic lab photo, the VIN etched on the frame, matching Keene's registration, and this, he continued, voice sharp as a blade, is undeniable proof. The defendant's DNA on the steering wheel and seatbelt, not a 1970 trace, but a mark of the crime. Briggs was called as the first witness. She swore in, standing straight, voice clear but calm. She recounted reopening the case in 2005, tracing the vehicle data, discovering it via sonar, and salvaging it. When the photo of the car surfacing was shown, the room fell silent. Everyone saw the warped shape, open door, and red coat fragment in the window frame. Briggs spoke slowly. We found the body seated in the driver's position, seatbelt fastened, head tilted right. The forehead impact showed the victim was unconscious before submersion. The car was placed at the slope's edge, gearbox in neutral, no brakes, no skid marks. It was staged. The prosecution displayed the forensic report's 3D simulation of the car sliding off the bridge. As the screen's light reflected on Briggs' face, she lowered her eyes, hands clenched. Harper watched, nodding slightly, then took the stand as the second witness. His aged, hoarse voice carried the weight of 50 years waiting. I was there that night, snow blanketing the bridge. I looked at the dark river and knew something was wrong. But we had no technology, no evidence, just a feeling. Today, that's been proven. Defense attorney Carl Jennings stood to object. Middle-aged, his voice soft. He aimed for empathy. Your Honor, my client doesn't deny being with Miss Halloway. But this was an accident, a fall, a panicked mistake. 50 years living silently with guilt is a heavier sentence than any penalty. He didn't intend murder. Jennings held up a statement copy. Miss Halloway fell, leaving the car. Mr. Keene thought she was dead, and in panic, pushed the car to hide it. No weapon, no motive to kill, Laird countered, voice steady but clear. Accidents don't involve lowering the handbrake and opening the door. Accidents don't place an unconscious person in the driver's seat and push the car into a lake. And accidents don't last 50 years in silence. He paused, looking at Keene. You left her underwater for half a century, letting her parents die without knowing where she lay. That's no longer an accident, it's a choice. In that moment, the courtroom was deathly still. Keene bowed his head, hands clenched, neck trembling. A few in the audience wept. Harper watched, eyes welling but unblinking. The prosecution closed with evidence photos, the movie ticket, red coat fabric, and broken heart-shaped keychain. Laird said, Ladies and gentlemen, Grace Halloway was 17. She may have made mistakes, but no one deserves to lie at the lake's bottom for half a century. If Mr. Keene truly regretted it, he had 50 years to speak. He didn't. Now, only justice speaks for her. Briggs sat silently, heart pounding with each accusatory word. When Judge Wexler called for a recess, she looked at Grace's photo on the wall, her youthful face, smile intact. Harper placed a hand on her shoulder, saying softly, Whatever the verdict, she's been brought back to light. Briggs nodded, silent. In her chest, her heartbeat echoed the accusations, still hanging in the thick courtroom air. Outside, winter wind swept through the pines, carrying a biting chill. As the courtroom lights dimmed, the room sank into silence, broken only by footsteps and rustling papers, like whispers of a past closing a chapter. That night, Briggs barely slept. Her mind held Grace's image, the smiling school photo on the courtroom wall, mixed with Robert Keene's trembling hands, bowing before the camera. She knew tomorrow would bring the end. No more arguments, no more assumptions, just a final judgment. The next morning, the trial entered sentencing. Winter's pale light filtered through frosted windows, illuminating Robert Keene's gaunt face, a man past 70, still shadowed by that snowy 1970 night. The courtroom held no press murmurs, no crime scene photos or legal debates, just the heavy silence of an unwanted end. Judge Arthur Wexler looked at the file, voice low and slow. Before sentencing, the court allows the defendant a final statement. Keene stood, leaning on the table, body trembling, voice hoarse with age and sleepless nights. "Your Honor," he began, "I stayed silent for 50 years, out of fear. I didn't mean to kill her. I swear, I made the stupidest choice of my life, when fear outweighed conscience." That night, Grace fell, hit her head on the car door. I called, but she didn't wake. I thought she was dead. I was scared. People wouldn't believe me. Scared of prison. I just wanted to hide it, hoping it would vanish. But nothing vanished. Every day for 50 years, I heard the water, heard the car sink, heard the bridge hum in the wind. I haven't slept soundly a single night. He paused, eyes red. In the audience, many bowed their heads. An elderly woman, Grace's cousin, wept, clutching an old handkerchief. Keene scanned the room, voice fading. "I don't ask forgiveness. I just want to say, I'm grateful she's finally found. Even if I die in prison, at least I don't have to pretend I'm innocent anymore." The judge nodded slightly. He said, "Defendant Robert A. Keene, the court acknowledges your cooperation and admission. But that doesn't erase the consequences of your actions. Fear cannot justify concealing a human's death. You left a family in agony for half a century, and a girl buried in silence." He flipped the file, voice even but cold. "For the charge of manslaughter in the first degree, the court sentences you to 15 years imprisonment. For the charge of evidence tampering, the court sentences you to 3 years imprisonment, consecutive. Total 18 years imprisonment, without parole." The gavel's sharp strike echoed, then faded into silence. Keene bowed his head, unmoving. Harper, in the front row, exhaled deeply, eyes closing. Briggs sat still, not taking notes, not looking at the defendant. She stared out the window, where gray clouds drifted west, toward the road to Dent Bridge, lost in fog. After the trial, Briggs stepped outside alone. Harper stayed to sign file transfers. On the cold stone steps, she took a deep breath, the wind carrying pine sap and river mist from the Clearwater. Far off, through snow-dusted hills, she saw Dent Bridge's faint outline, a steel arc suspended over the water, where it all began and ended. She walked to a roadside railing, looking down at the cold, flowing water. Images flashed, the brown wagon, buried in mud, Grace's brown hair tangled in the current, Harper's trembling hands, seeing her body raised. And finally, Keene's face, empty, weary, but humanly undeniable, the face of guilt after exhausting all excuses. Briggs pulled a small photo from her coat, Grace's school picture, always kept in the file. She placed it on the railing, staring at the face. "It's finally done, Grace," she whispered. "We found you." Harper approached, hat in hand. He stood beside her, silent a moment, then said, "When I was young, I thought justice was the verdict. But the older I got, I realized, sometimes it's just the truth being spoken, no matter how late." Briggs nodded, replying softly. "And sometimes, it's just someone no longer forgotten." They stood there, saying no more. The river flowed quietly below, its surface mirroring the gray sky. Far off, Dent Bridge faded into fog, a fragile link between past and present. That afternoon, as Briggs left Clearwater for Boise, she glanced in the rearview mirror. A small roadside sign read, Dent Bridge Road. Established 1954. Under snow, tire tracks faded, and in her heart, a heavy yet calm feeling mingled. The case was closed, but the story lingered, of a 17-year-old girl, a man defeated by fear, and a bridge holding both their memories. That evening, the local news anchor spoke slowly. After 50 years, the disappearance of Grace Halloway in Orofino has officially closed. Robert Keene, 71, was sentenced to 18 years. The victim was reburied at Orofino Cemetery, beside the Clearwater. Dent Bridge, where she vanished, is now a landmark visited each winter, not just for snow, but to remember. Ellen Briggs turned off the TV, sitting alone in her dark room. Outside, snow fell lightly, like final memory fragments dissolving in the air. She thought of Grace, Harper, and other unsolved cases. But tonight, one soul rested. Somewhere under Dent Bridge, the water flowed, carrying away silence, but never erasing what was finally spoken. The story of Grace Halloway and its half-century investigation is not just a personal tragedy, but a reflection of justice's enduring spirit in American society, where the belief that truth can be buried but not forgotten holds steadfast. Finding Grace's body after 50 years, through sonar, DNA, and the persistence of people like Ellen Briggs and Dale Harper, shows that scientific progress only gains meaning when paired with conscience and compassion. In today's America, with advanced technology and meticulous data storage, this case reminds us that every datum, every trace, every old box in a garage may hold a forgotten truth. Just as Briggs found the car under Dent Bridge by revisiting yellowed receipts, in modern life, answers sometimes lie not in the newest things, but in what we've overlooked. Grace's case also shows the power of personal responsibility and honesty. Robert Keene wasn't a cold-blooded killer, but fear led him to silence, and that silence made him a criminal. In a society valuing freedom and rule of law like the United States, this story warns, when people hide the truth out of fear, they harm others and destroy themselves. The greatest lesson from the Halloway case is that truth always needs someone brave enough to stand for it, even after 50 years. In today's world, where misinformation spreads fast, seeking and speaking truth remains the boldest act and the foundation for a just, humane society. If you believe truth, no matter how long buried, deserves to be found, subscribe to our channel to join us in exploring cases time forgot. Thank you for following Grace Halloway's story. See you in the next video, where another mystery comes to light.